gentlemen, I would like to welcome Mr. Robert Fleming. Robert is an incredible poet, graphic artist, communicator, who I'm sure has done all kinds of different graphic presentations, and his poetic work is extraordinary. Robert, welcome to Poets of the East. I
Thank
always
you. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Richard, for hosting me.
Certainly. I always make a point of telling people East is, in a sense, a metaphor for the fact that in my mind, every poet is a sunrise, every poet brings their light. So whenever we face a poet, we face the East, and therefore poets of the East. Robert, sir, I always enjoy discovering new things about poets, about what it is behind that poet, how they were brought here, what their early inspirations were when they start. So let me ask my first question. Robert, when did you start writing? Were you a child writer, a scholastic writer, or something else?
I initially started in elementary school. I attended Roslyn Elementary School in Montreal, Quebec. My education was half in English and half in French. For our French education in grade 4 through grade 6, we had French composition. At that time, students had a blue notebook, and the teacher made different assignments for both writing poems as well as short fiction, which would be considered flash fiction today for the students. And it was all in French.
Wonderful. So you started out bilingual quite young.
I did. As an early child, my mother says I was resistant to making requests through vocalization. And I was very much focusing on using pointing with my finger. So when I wanted something to drink, I would point to the refrigerator. And when my mother would open the fridge, I would point to the apple juice as opposed to vocalize what I wanted.
So you were a pointillist then.
Yes, from the beginning.
When you were young, obviously you were engaging with literature and in the writing process young. Were there any authors that you remember distinctly that stuck out in your mind that were inspirational for you?
One of my favorites was A. Mills. Now we are six. And one of my favorite poems by him is called We Two. It is about Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh, who go outside to find dragons.
Nice. Were you engaged later in school as a reporter or an editor in your school newspapers, or did you pass on that stuff?
In high school, I was not doing that. In grade 11, I took a class called North American Literature, which had very broad genres that they exposed you to. One of the genres was poetry, where when we were in that phase, every week we had to write a one-page summary of and review of a poem.
Oh, really? Yeah, I had a very seminal experience myself. In seventh grade, we were tasked, and this was really clearly out of the blue. Our instructor, we were doing a section on Native American culture. And out of the blue, with no preliminaries at all, she said, I want you to write a poem about Native Americans. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting problem. And I wrote a poem that has stuck with me to this day. Lo, these many, many years ago. Let me ask you the next question. Now, writing poetry is one thing, share it with your intimates, with your friends, with the lover is another. But then stepping out, coming out and presenting poetry, speaking it aloud, recitation. When did you start doing poetry readings per se? Do you remember?
Well, when I attended college at Brandeis University from 1980 through 84, there was a university alternative newspaper called The Watch, which had a literary arts section. And I did start publishing my work in that newspaper. That newspaper never had live readings. My junior year in college, I applied to be in a poetry class led by Denise Levertov, who was included in the Norton Anthology of Modern Poetry. And in that class, Denise asked us to read our poems. That really was the first time I recited a poem I wrote in front of other people.
Was that, some people find this more painful than the trip to the dentist or something, but other people just take to it. You strike me as a person with a bit of a dramatic flair. Was it tough for you to do that public recitation?
No, I was comfortable. Starting in elementary school, again at Roslyn School, I participated in after school drama. In grade 4, I played in Alice Looking Through the Looking Glass. I played Humpty Dumpty and fell from the wall. And I sat on a piece of gym equipment, which was supposed to be the wall. And that was where I learned to be comfortable, first at memorizing material and then reciting it in front of other people.
Let me ask you this: Were some people have an experience with their teachers that they're nurtured, that they're stroked, that they're helped forward, they're encouraged, and some people, scholastic instruction was not really part of their poetic experience. How about you? Were you supported, encouraged by your teachers?
I was very encouraged by Denise Levertov, my first poetry teacher. To get into her class, you had to submit 2 poems, and she selected about 15 people. The first class, everybody read 1 poem, and then at the end, Denise stopped and said, "Is there any poem that you heard which you think has anything which is memorable in it?" And nobody would answer. Denise, such a famous poet. And then she recited the first 2 lines from the poem that I had written. And she was a very good teacher. She was very encouraging and understood that we were all just beginning writers. And she was just encouraging us to be a little bit better.
Very good, very good. Um, if you look back on those early years, were there some poets or some writers, just writers even, that really stuck out in your mind that you really thought, wow, I may or may not want to emulate them, but I'm just really impressed with their ability to capture an experience or to share something that their insight.
In I think it was in 1996, I had a sleepless night, and I decided to do a study of 4 poets and to take their best work to first write it by hand, and then to type it and to recite it out loud. All of the poets who I chose, including Robert Frost, were heterosexual, and even at that time I was gay, and I chose to convert the poem from a heterosexual flavor to a homosexual flavor. Um, and Robert Frost has always been a big influence on me as a writer. What I really like about his work is that he is able to bring the reader to the now. You know, you feel like you're immediately with him in nature, in the woods. And that's something which I've always tried to do for my reader, especially by making most work in the present tense.
Let me ask you this, because I don't want to leave your artistic side completely absent. When you were a young man, a student, were you a pen or a pencil or a watercolors? What was your favorite medium as a youngster?
I would say it was a pencil. Uh, when I was about 8 years old, I developed an interest in drawing roller coasters,
Hmm.
and my mother got me very large paper, which I put on the kitchen table, and that is where I would draw my roller coasters, and I did it all with pencil.
Really? Were you drawing from imagination, from photos?
It was all from memory. Um, During the summer in Montreal, I really enjoyed going to the amusement park and watching the roller coasters and going on them. There was a very old wooden roller coaster, and I really liked the rattling and the sound that it made when it went around the curves.
Interesting, interesting. So as you aged, did your mediums change? Did you move from pencil to watercolor to ink to, what we might call the Photoshop Illustrator era of things?
But when I was in high school in grade 9, I started taking art classes, and the teacher was more focused on giving the students a broad overview of different genres and different materials. Um, and I was compliant. I followed her direction. Um, One of my very enjoyable pieces in grade 9 was creating an art piece out of batik, where the material was cloth and you use wax. Um, I created a fantasy dragon image, which I still have that.
No kidding. Nice. Now, I'm a bit of a graphic person myself. Started drawing when I could hold a pencil. Contributed artwork to high school, college, and stuff. But it seems to me often there's a divide in computer artists. Are you more the Photoshop editing type or the more Illustrator line approach, vector approach? Or do you not have a difference? You do enjoy them both?
I'm probably more the Photoshop and graphic image editor. Um, I have taken a class on Illustrator, and I'm able to use it, but that usually is not my medium.
Okay, super. All right, now let us turn to a little more contemporary times. At what point, we all have a shift in our center of balance, or many of us do, about when did you really begin to think of yourself as a writer?
Uh, I would say when I was in college, um, I I was one of the contributing writers for the college newspaper called The Watch. And the newspaper was a little bit different than a traditional newspaper in that we did not disclose the roles of the people in the newspaper. We didn't say who was the editor-in-chief. Everybody was a staff writer. And we also did not say who wrote the different articles. Uh, we were we were accused of being a communist newspaper
Weren't we
at the
all?
time. And at that time, I I was involved in not only the selections of the work, but the placement of the work on this page. It was before uh, there were
That's how
computers.
publishing. Yeah.
Yeah. And we also had one of the sections in the newspaper was a special feature in news. It was usually more international or more issue oriented. And I wrote probably 5 to 10 of those. And I did feel like I was a writer because not only was I writing, but I was producing and distributing the paper to the students of the school.
Interesting. All right, now there is a spectrum of opinion of poets and writers. Some say you've got to write every day, you've got to write all the time, keep writing whether you have inspiration or not, just to practice the craft. And others say no, 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 no. You got to wait for inspiration. Trying to force it is a fool's errand. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Because it's a continuum.
I find that I fall in the forcing. So I'm a member of the Rehoboth Beach Writers Guild. And on Monday afternoon from 3 to 4:30, we have a library event, which is a free write. There's usually about 5 prompts. And I remember from the movie The Miracle Worker, where the water pump, was pushed. Helen Keller's teacher, Annie Sullivan, was pushing her and trying to teach Annie the word water. And I view that my skills, both as a writer, as an artist, that I need to keep my pump going. And it's okay if the pump produces really bad work and I don't continue with it. So for example, at that free write, which is an hour and a half, I would produce maybe 5 first drafts. And I usually write on a pad. I would come home and type them all. And I probably would only go forward with 2 of them. And I accept that.
Yeah, I came across what I considered a real important idea from a writer named Italo Calvino. I don't know if you've heard of his work. He writes a lot of absurdist stuff, but he said the best antidote to what we typically call writer's block is to sit down and describe something that you have no intention to show to anybody. Just describe some innocuous, insignificant little thing, describe it to your best power, and that exercise alone will improve your writing. And I had at that moment I was really stumped. I couldn't think of anything to write. So what I had was a duty to take out the recyclables. So I gathered the paper products and the glass products and the plastic products, put them into their separate bins, carried them out to the road, and I thought, perfect example. Now, what in God's name would convince me to share a simple story of the narration of collecting the recyclables? But it turned into a really good story. And I've followed that good example. He also has a comment he makes that he's written the shortest short story. And I've seen some short ones, but his story went like this. He woke up and the dinosaur was still there. Ha! Which I thought was pretty interesting. Okay, next question. Are there themes or topics that you find yourself returning to again and again? Need a moment?
Yeah, I'll just have a drink.
Go ahead. So are there topics that you return to again and again?
There are. I I believe in following the motto, write what you know. And there's about five topics which I have discovered that I know them, and I'm able to reveal to the reader or the viewer something new. And that's what I think creativity is revealing a new truth to the reader. One of the topics I know well is being a man and masculinity, and I write about that. Another topic I know about is being gay, and I write about that. Another topic which my grandfather really introduced me to when I was a child is the Bible. I'm very familiar with the Bible, and I have done a lot of both visual work and text work about sin and virtue.
There's a marvelous film, I think it's called Race the Devil, a comedy with Humphrey Bogart and an interesting. Anyway, there's a line in it where a woman says, "Well, my husband is mostly concerned with the problem of sin," and it's said with all irony. But anyway, interesting points. Thank you. Now, you've been participating in international Zooms for a while. Has there been anything in it that surprised you?
You know, one thing which was a big benefit was the Zooms helped me survive COVID. For me, and for probably for most people, there was a lot of social isolation during COVID, and it allowed me to connect with other people to feel less alone.
Okay. Now this is another complex question. Do you feel that poets have a responsibility to address societal issues?
No, I don't feel that. I would say only about, I'd say 3% of my work is political, and there are about 2 literary magazines which address politics. One is called Writers Resist. My view is that both a writer and a visual artist, they have to find their voice. And if their voice is political, then they need to pursue that. But if it's not, they don't have to.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, if a young person came to you and said, I occasionally feel like I should be writing, but I'm not sure that poetry is a thing. is it a valid way to spend one's time? Is poetry valid? Is poetry real or worth it?
Well, I think it is because it has been on, there's so much historical record of uh, it being a valid form of communication. Um, Even before Christ, BC, there are records of poetry existing and in different languages. And, one of the other thing is that there's tremendous viewing of poetry. Shakespeare was not only a poet, but he was a playwright. And I would argue that many of Shakespeare's plays, the lines are poetry, and that Shakespeare has probably the greatest viewership, his plays, of any plays that have existed. The other viewership is, I would say, is Dr. Seuss. Uh, Most of Dr. Seuss books are a poem, which is about 40 lines broken up over 20 pages. And he is one of the most successful children's writers. So there is an indirect tremendous viewing of poetry even now.
Absolutely. I had a chance. I met a young man hitchhiking named Homer, and at first he was very reluctant to even tell me his name. And I said, my friend, don't worry about it. He goes, no, no, I got a dumb name. You don't even want to hear my name. It's a dumb name. And I said, and this was strictly on inspiration. I said, you know what? I bet if you tell me your name, I can tell you something amazing about it that you don't know. And my wife looked at me and went, are you kidding? Gee, many Christmas. So he said, well, and very dejectedly, he said, my name's Homer. I said, let me ask you this. I said, have you ever heard of Ulysses? He said, oh yeah, no, that's a name, boy. That's a name. Wow, I wish I had that name. I said, you know what? You know who Ulysses is? And he said, oh, I guess he's someone from the Bible. I said, no, no, older than the Bible. And he goes, well, I don't know what. And I said, there was a poet named Homer who told such an amazing story that thousands of years later, you know about the hero that he wrote about. He said, well, damn, how come nobody ever told me that? And I said, well, maybe you needed to hear it now. Okay, next. What makes a good poet?
Uh, I would say that the work evokes a response from the reader, and any response from a reader is wonderful except boredom and confusion. And what I said to before is that the poet is able to reveal a new truth about something. One of the great poets who is alive now is Billy Collins, and he is a poet of the people because he's able to take common everyday activities or ideas which people deal with and to reveal new truths about them.
Okay, final question, sir. Is narrative important in a poem?
I would say not for me. Uh, I try to separate the genres of poetry where the line is essential from fiction, where the line isn't essential. One of the elements which is critical for narrative in fiction is for there to be a character arc. And you don't have to have that in a poem. You can have everything happen at one point in time, and there does not have to be change in the poem, and it still can be a wonderful work.
Thank you. Well, now the fun part. Now is when I turn to poet Robert Fleming and say, Robert, you got 20 minutes, buddy. Anything you want to read, you go for it. You know, the part I like about this is we're not constrained by the 3 minute, 4 minute window that, you know, we all enjoy in the Zoom universe. But now, sir, whatever poem you'd like to read, feel free.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to share the screen.
Okay. Oh, let me set it up. It's all yours, buddy.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with the age that I was when I wrote my first poem in my French notebook. This is in 1975 when I was age 12. And this is my my blue composition exercise book. This was my first visual poem, which I wrote in 1974. I originally wrote it just in French, and it was only recently that I translated it into English and put the English at the bottom. And I will read it. Plante à fleurs, orange, comestible, vit dans la terre, bon pour manger, carotte. Flowering plant, orange, eatable, lives in the earth, good for eating, carrot.
Bravo, sir. Bravo.
And I initially wrote this with a blue pen, and the carrot was created with Crayola crayons.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of my my high school teachers, Miss Berger, who included in her classes a segment on poetry. This is one of the poems that I wrote in high school. I will read it. Sunblind. All dreams seek you to be their dreamer. Nature borrows from your halcyon beauty. The sun follows in your shadow, and I follow the sun. This was one of the poems which I submitted to get into Denise Levertov's poetry class, and the first two lines were the ones that she particularly liked in the poem.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you. Now I'm going to share about my book, White Noir, which was published in November of 2023 by Old Scratch Press. I want to start by showing the trailer.
May I ask you one question before you
Sure.
start? White noir is an interesting choice. Would you like to explain it or not?
Certainly, I'll explain it. So it is a reference to me being a bilingual speaker. So white is in English and noir is in French. It means black. And it is also one of the, I guess, the styles of writing which I have, which is representing duality. And so it references black and white, which are opposites.
One more question, if I may. Old Scratch. Now in one set of cultures, that's referring to the devil, and not necessarily in the evil sense, but in the more in the cultural historiographic sort of sense. What is the reference of Old Scratch Press? I notice you have that logo on your background.
Right. Originally, there was a press in Milton, Delaware, called Devil's Party Press. And 2 years ago, the editors-in-chief created a imprint, a smaller press within that, and we chose to call it Old Scratch to be consistent with the name of the parent press.
Gotcha. Just curious. My original appellation for my writing was the Alien Arbitration Association. So I have I enjoy humor that comes with so many names. But thank you for explaining it. Please continue, good sir.
So I'm going to play the video now.
Okay. You probably still want to share screen.
Yeah, I need to get back and I need to share the screen for that.
No problem.
And then I need to share original sound. And I'm going to ask you, Richard, to tell me whether you can hear it.
Okay. Yep.
So I'd like to.
Very good.
I'm back. I'd like to thank David Jovanovich of Current Word Publishing, who put together my video for me. And I want to share a few of the poems in the book, and I will share what is my contribution to visual poetry from them. So this is called Return to the Garden. Apple trees are under the sky, but need a roof. Eve needs sky. Pear trees are soiled, but need a linoleum floor. Adam needs soil. Cherry trees are an open space, but need walls. Jack needs open space. Banana trees have sap, but need blood. Jill needs sap. Move the orchard inside the house. Return all humans under the sky. So what you will notice about this visual poem is that the background is black, but the text is white, which is the opposite of the typical page. The form of the poem is a mirror poem, and this expands on the mirror poem in two ways. The right column is right justified, and then the text in the right column goes from right to left. So those are contributions to form for the poem. The second poem is called New York City Exhibitionist and Hoboken, New Jersey Voyeur on the 32nd story across the Hudson River. 10 p.m. 10 p.m. Blinds, curtain, raise, pull, undress, strip, binoculars, binoculars, naked, nude, masturbate, masturbate, climax, climax, blinds, curtain, lower, pull. One of the areas in visual poetry is concrete poetry, where the main object of the poem is the shape of the poem. And what is new about this poem is that the shape is of a skyscraper, which I have not seen before. This one is called Spatula. 1,000 pushes by a palm and elbow, I will bat balls, bulldoze trees. I am spatula. What is unique about this is the concrete image is created with a graphic image as opposed to text. Now I'm going to shift a little bit to the work that I'm doing for Old Scratch Press. The press is about 2 years old, and I am one of the founding contributing editors, one of 11 members. Our accomplishments so far have been, in 2023, we published 2 books. One was nominated for the National Book Award in Poetry, and one was an Amazon bestseller. In 2024, this year, we published 4 books, and 3 of them were nominated for the National Book Award in Poetry. The features that we were able to get were in the United States and California at Time to Arrive, in Massachusetts at Stone Soup and Dyer Literary Series, in India at Time to Unmesh, and in England at Spoken Label. The tasks that I do for the press are, for the monthly meeting, I create the agenda and run the meetings. I write blog posts. Every member of the press is asked to write 2 posts a year. And then for every new author publication, each member is asked to write a book review. Also, when a new author has a feature, if they're not experienced at doing a feature, I will coach them. I have also been one of the publicists who have gotten features for the other authors and created their event flyers. The press has an affiliated digital magazine called Instant Noodles. I am the editor for visual arts and multimedia. Now I'm gonna shift a little and talk about challenges I have as a writer, as an artist. There are 2 types of writing styles, traditional and experimental. I am an experimental writer, both because of my form being visual poetry and because of the content includes taboo subjects like religion, violence, and sex. One of the quotes from the Midwest Review about my book, White Noir, said, "Some, usually those already steepled in predictable poetic roots and choices, will hate Fleming's approach. His style is not for everyone." And one of the feedbacks I got from a Delaware contest judge, at times, the formal visual elements seem to overshadow the content and languages of the poems. This judge only liked work where the visual element was created with text. She did not like any work with graphics. And I live in Delaware. There's only one alternative content magazine called Dream Streets. There are a lot of the local areas near where I live prefer traditional writing, including Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, and Southern New Jersey. In 2021, I moved my publication targets to California, where I've been successful, New York, where I haven't had any publications, and large metropolitan cities like Chicago, where I have been successful. While I was targeting publications in Delaware and closer to the states that I lived in, I only had a publication rate of about 3%. And then after I moved to California, I'm about at a 33%. So I've been much more successful in California. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges I've had as a publisher, as an editor. Well, I attempted, since Old Scratch Press created in 2023, to get features in the United Kingdom. But I had not been attended open mics there, and I don't know the people directly. I have not been successful in getting features in the United Kingdom. There's about 5 open mic hosts who have featured either Old Scratch Press or their authors. And I wanted to thank them. I have offered them non-competitive publication in the Old Scratch Press Instant Noodles. I haven't had any submissions from them. So this thank you has not appealed to them. The other thing for the Instant Noodles magazine, I have been trying to get more diverse submissions. And I noticed that it's very popular with African Americans to do performance poetry. In Instant Noodles, we have low submissions from African Americans, and I added a genre for multimedia and video and publicized it heavily. And I failed to get submissions in video and multimedia. And I'm just going to share what are my next goals for myself. In 2024, I had a goal to submit to the top 100 poetry magazines. I already submitted visual content to the magazine Hole in the Head, both for cover photo and interior, and I was rejected. I still have to submit to the magazine Poetry, and I have 2 poems to edit before submission. I currently have about 50 poems which I have critiqued, but which I have not edited. I need to edit those, and I have about 12 magazines which I'm a repeat contributor to, which I will be submitting those to. I finished my my sales of my book White Noir in April of 2024. I've taken a little bit of a break over the summer, and in the fall, I want to plan and select what I'm going to go forward with as a writer and as an artist. In September, the Old Scratch Press will start meeting again, and I will be running the meetings, still continuing to do that. And then one of the authors is going to be having a feature, Gabby Gilliam, at the Dyer Literary Series in November, and I will be promoting that event. And our Instant Noodles summer issue will be published, and I will help create an issue launch. I want to thank you for letting me share some of my work and some of the challenges that I'm experiencing as a writer, as an artist, both as a person and also as a member of a press and an editor of a literary magazine. Thank you, Richard.
Robert, it's been my pleasure, very much so, to learn a little bit more about you and experience more of your work. I try to always at least share one of my pieces with my guests, and I hope you'll find it mildly amusing. It's a visual poem in respect of your work, and I have, while I've been multimedia for a long time, I cut my teeth originally not only as a child illustrating, drawing, and writing stories. I was given a tape recorder at 8 years old, and I used to go around and interview people. But the world of multimedia really opened up for me when I was in high school back in '68. I met a group of performance light artists. They had a theater in a warehouse district in Miami, and you would walk in and you'd be surrounded by plexiglass sculpture. You walk through a mirror mylar door into a space where there was images and words projected across the room. Plexiglass sculptures that pulsed. The lower parts of the sculptures pulsed to the low sounds, the mids to the mid sounds, the tops to the high pitch sounds. And you'd hear anything from Vivaldi to Moody Blues, from Beethoven to Musique Concrete. It was an amazing thing. It really opened me up. And I offered myself as an indentured servant to this group of artists. And to me, as both a musician, an artist, and a writer, this was the perfect medium for me. Multimedia was, in fact, what I didn't even know that I was. So, but now let's skip ahead to a few decades later, and let me share this one piece with you. I think you may find it amusing. I've got 5 skunks on my porch. This might very well leave you in the lurch. Not exactly the funnest trip to the local church. We opened the door to feed the cat, and that's what we saw. We were feeding that. A family of skunks all over the porch. They were rolling and tumbling all in a lurch. The cat, cool as a cucumber, observed it all from high above on her perch with aplomb and de jure. Observed it all in disinterested amusement. The skunks were scrambling and snuffling. We watched them all through the doorway in bewildered confusement. We keep a squirt gun by the door to shoo off the errant neighbor's cat from dining at our kitty's smorgasbord, and well, then there's that. What should we squirt the errant skunks we might leave behind their awful funk? Should we let them forage at will with panache, lest our cat food continually be their luncheon snatch? My wife leapt out and gave him a squirt, letting that powerful stream of water do its work. So surprised were they tumbled away with evidently, my dear, nothing more to say. Well,
You
sir.
know what I liked about your poem is that it reminds me of Dr. Seuss, because the text is broken down over multiple pages, so it would be more understandable by children, and there's a lot of rhyme which would let the children read it like a song.
Yeah, I got a warning. I started performing in public during the anti-war rally days. I was an anti-war activist back during the Vietnam War era, And a friend pulled me aside and said, Richard, let me tell you something. Your poetry's good, but you rhyme. And I said, well, yeah, I do. He said, well, you'll never get anywhere in poetry if you rhyme. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. Um, I do what my muse suggests. I don't argue. I just write it down. So I came to a conclusion a long time ago that I was not going to be writing for popular taste. Like yourself, I'm at peace with that. And I want to end up by saying thank you, brother. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your art, your life, your insights, and some of your work. Have a wonderful day, my friend.
Thank you for hosting me, Richard. Have a good day.